Everyone to the Tuesday, July 28th meeting of the Health and Education Committee. I'm going to take a moment here and ask, if there's no objection, we're going to let the school board go first because they need to get back to the school board meeting. So, Doug, if you and Dr. Sullivan want to come on up. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just jumping right into business, trying to get them out of here. First of all, let me make this announcement about our electronic meeting. This meeting of the Health and Education Committee is being conducted electronically pursuant to Governor Bill Lee's Executive Order 16. I would ask for a motion that conducting the meeting electronically is necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare in light of the coronavirus.
Move to approve.
Commissioner Blair, Commissioner DePerley. You call a roll?
Commissioner Blair?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook? Yes. Commissioner Ely? Yes. Commissioner Gammon?
Yes.
Commissioner Gorley?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Chairman Allen?
Yes. Very good, thank you. Will you call the roll? I didn't do that either. So will you call the roll? I didn't do that either.
No, you're fine.
Okay. All right. All right, our first order of business then is to approve the minutes from our previous meeting.
Madam Chairman, I would move to approve the minutes of the meeting of June 22nd. I find them in order and without objection. Again, move to approve.
Thank you. We need a second. Ms. Carroll seconding.
Commissioner Cook? Yes. Commissioner Ely? Yes. Commissioner Gammon?
Yes.
Commissioner Gurley?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips? Commissioner Phillips? He sounds off, but I seen him say yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Blair?
Yes.
Chairman Allen?
Yes, very good. All right, now we'll invite the school board to come forward. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Thank you for allowing us to jump ahead on the agenda so we can get back to the school board. They're having the special call meeting at 6:30, so we appreciate you letting us jump ahead. Tonight on the agenda, what I have for you is a budget amendment, and this is a little bit unique because typically we would have had the school board meeting at 5 o'clock, and then we would have come to you with this budget amendment for approval after the school board had voted on it. But because of the timing of this, I'm asking that you would vote on this tentatively with the school board approving this in about an hour, when they meet. And once I read through this, you can understand I wanted, because of the nature of the money transfer, I wanted this committee to know before the money was transferred, what was going on. So I was coming here to ask for permission, not forgiveness in a month, at your next meeting. That's the somewhat irregularity with this, but the board is aware that I'm requesting this before they vote on it, and this is tentative of their approval. So the budget amendment that I have, the proposed budget amendment before you tonight, it's for the Fund 141, the General Purpose School Fund. It is a transfer of funds. It says this budget amendment authorizes transfer of up to $1.5 million of unassigned fund balance from the General Purpose School Fund to the centralized school cafeteria fund to maintain adequate cash flow until operating revenue is stabilized under distance learning school student feeding operations, as well as until adequate school nutrition staffing levels for distant learning school student feeding operations can be determined. This transfer will also maintain traditional school staffing levels for the month of August 2020 to allow for a smooth school nutrition department opening in all Rutherford County schools should COVID-19 infection numbers drop to acceptable levels in Rutherford County, to allow for a transition back to a traditional school setting in early September 2020, with the recommended motion to approve the transfer of up to $1.5 million of unassigned fund balance from the General Purpose School Fund to the Central School Cafeteria Fund as presented for the continued operation of the Rutherford County School Nutrition Department as detailed above. Now, obviously, our school board has already voted on August the 10th July the 10th to do a traditional open. Since then, of course, we've been watching, like the school board said they would be, as looking at the infection rates as they have climbed dramatically since the 10th forward. I do not know what the determination of our school board will be here in an hour. When they vote, they may vote to continue with full opening. They may vote to have some type of hybrid, or they may vote to do distance learning to start the year. I just want to make sure that if they vote to do distance learning, that I have funds available to do that. Do you want me to elaborate more on this?
I understand the motion. Are there any questions for Doug before we proceed?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Yes,
Go
Doug, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Is the cafeteria fund in such bad shape that it cannot wait till the end of the month, end of August? It cannot make it from August, from starting time of school for 3 weeks until such time as we meet again?
If what I was looking at was we have funds available to do a traditional opening of schools, and I've monitored this. We've discussed this, during budget time in the spring, and we have meticulously watched the cash flow of that fund during the school closure, and just to let folks know, if you didn't know this, that the cafeteria fund operations, they're not in the general purpose school fund, where the tax levy's at. They are a separate fund, and they're funded with meals served to the children as well as adults. So when we closed the schools and went to just an emergency feeding, that of course dramatically reduced the revenue in that fund, and of course was pulling down the fund balance, the cash balances of that fund. Of course, we discussed this quite a bit during the budget time, and I kept the board and the commission up to date on where this was. We achieved our goal of being able to have enough cash on hand to do a traditional opening of schools. That said, I just wanted to have funding in place in case we switch back to a virtual, because that would of course reduce the amount of revenue that would bring in.
I'm well aware that this is a separate fund, and that's part of what concerns me, is it is a separate fund, separate from the GPS, and I know the differences that took place at the end of this past year and the adjustments we made and approved right at the end of the year prior to passing a new budget. It just concerns me that there's not enough money for 3 weeks of operation period of and I mean, this could be a special, it's got to come back to the commission anyway, but we could handle this via the committee voting on it, or even bypassing the committee and going directly to budget if that were the case of something changing tonight. And I sat in and listened this afternoon to what the state's saying and their briefing with the governor and the 2 commissioners and everything. I've also gathered some data myself throughout the day, and it does concern me that we're dropping $1.5 million out of GPS over into the cafeteria fund when we don't even know that we need it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Commissioner Boyd.
Doug, you're not pulling 1.5 million out. You're you're having adequate funds available in case you need them.
That's correct. And also, when I say virtual, let's say they had a hybrid where we would have some that would be on virtual, and that was discussed throughout the summer, that could be an option. That would, of course, decrease the participation in the school nutrition with less students being there. This, of course, would help with, as we adjusted to, right size and what type of staffing we would need for that new type of feeding. this 1.5 million would help, up to 1.5 million would help as we transitioned into the fall. So I want to reiterate, we have enough funds to go through 3 weeks. We have enough to, like I said, we could do a traditional open and be okay with the cash we have on hand. I've watched that since the springtime when this started happening. I just want to have this authority to be able to, if I need to transfer some funds, because we've never done this before. And I don't even know, like I said, I don't know what they're going to vote. But if they do, I just wanted to be prepared, and I did not want to come back here and say, oh, by the way, now I really need this.
I have a question, Doug.
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any part of the funding that we're getting as part of the CARES AIDS package, is there any part of that could be used for any of this?
Good question. We did not get near the funding that some of the other systems like Nashville received in CARES Act yet so far. We utilized that for a lot of that for the online platforms because, and Ms. Sullivan, Dr. Sullivan will talk about that here in a minute, we've already had over 8,000 students elect to do the option of doing distance education on an online platform, even if we traditionally open. So that's already going to decrease more than likely the participation in the nutrition fund. It will also that CARES Act money is being used for those children already for that. Now, as far as federal dollars, we're going to be putting in for a FEMA disaster reimbursement grant for some of these costs for the nutrition fund. So we are applying for federal assistance with this nutrition fund. Just not CARES Act.
Any other questions for Doug? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Ely? Yes. Commissioner Gammon?
Yes.
Commissioner Gurley?
No.
Commissioner Phillips? Commissioner Phillips?
No.
Commissioner Blair?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook? Yes. Chairman Allen?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Motion passes. Appreciate that. I asked Dr. Sullivan to come, he and Doug to come. I knew we would have lots of questions. Some they'll have answers for and some they will not. So, but if you just want to, just give us a quick overview of what's going on.
Thank you, committee, for having me. So when we think about what the school board voted on July 9th with our traditional opening with the option for parents to do distance learning, we are still operating under that plan. We have a 43-page comprehensive document on our website that has also been made available to every parent and every stakeholder. Every school is then taking that plan and adapting things to meet their school building. So for us, this is what needs, in a traditional classroom setting, what instruction looks like in elementary and also what it looks like in secondary. And then we also have what does that look like in a distance learning platform. We did that as a district. Then we asked our principal groups from elementary, middle, and high school to get together and look at the designs for their unique structures, where elementary walks their kids to the cafeteria and walks their kids to some of their related arts classes, and to where high school is more open on campus. And each one of those then have submitted a school-specific plan about how do they handle the cafeteria, how are they going to handle students going to classes, lockers, how are they disinfecting in between rotations in the classroom, just every aspect you could possibly think of. Some of their documents are another 20 and 25 pages as well. So we could have a unique structure to our district, but then also take in the unique needs of our schools. As of this morning at about 10 o'clock, we had 8,499 students or parents who have chosen to do distance learning. We've extended that deadline to August 5th. We originally asked them for July 28th to just let us know. But we also have made our parents and our principals very well aware that if you have an extenuating circumstance, work with our parents, take that customer service approach, because they are our customers, and work with them if they need to change back or forth or what have you. While 8,499 is a lot, we are still only at about 17% of our overall student enrollment. And so while that does make a difference for the overcrowding in our classrooms, it is still, we are sitting with right over 39,000 students who we expect to be traditionally in our building as of this morning at 10 o'clock. So, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or anything that you have.
With the, I guess, the increased janitorial staff for disinfecting, I assume it's going to be all hands on deck during the school time periods as far as disinfecting.
Absolutely.
During the day. I mean, is that going to be certified and classified responsibility?
Yes, sir, it is. It really, if we're thinking about individual classrooms, when they're rotating within their classroom, that falls largely on the teacher responsibility. But then we also have end of the day restroom procedures after cafeteria switches so that we can have, before a new group comes in, our cafeteria and janitorial staff come in and clean those. But a lot of it does follow that daily instruction on some of our certified teachers.
I have a question. How is your data platform, the IT side, prepared for this? Is it capable of handling 8,500 to 9,000 students online at any one time?
Yes, sir. Of course, we have, outside of testing, never tried that before, but everything that we have tested to this point, it is. I'm not as concerned about the 8,000 or 9,000 doing distance learning. We met with our IT department yesterday and talked about if we have teachers and we are at any point have to shut an entire school or a grade level down, is our bandwidth going to be able to support all 6 or 8 of those teachers streaming live into students' homes at one point? And we feel like we can control that by, we may have to shut down some of our streaming services, whether we're using different web-based, we may have to shut those down to give us more bandwidth. But as of right now, yes, we feel, without ever testing it at that large of a scale, we feel confident that it should be fine. We know with our student data management platform with Skyward and Kidham, it will absolutely hold it. I do worry about some of our outlying areas of the county access, because I even think of where I live in Christiana, depending on the time, it can be hard to really get a reliable signal long enough to be able to stream for an extended period of time. But in that case, we are recording, and then we also have a Wi-Fi extender and router at each one of our comprehensive high schools and our K-12 school at Eagleville, so that we could have a much larger bandwidth if somebody needed it.
That's the second part of my question. I just recently, my daughter just recently moved to New York City, and we took a hotspot with us on one of the carriers. Cell site is diagonally a half a block across on a rooftop, but doing online connection back to her employer, it became woefully lacking, as well as eating up a tremendous amount of data. And we were soon able to get Spectrum in with fiber into the apartment. But as you said, there's a lot of the county that cell service is woefully lacking, and especially bandwidth is equivalent to power, which is power dissipates by the square root or the square of, however you want to look at it, of the distance. And so I'm concerned that a lot of these people know, even if you provide the equipment, it's not going to work.
And I will tell you, even though we can't speak for other districts, that's something that our team has talked about. You know, we may have sufficient bandwidth right now, but when you have a much larger district to our north that also goes all virtual, how does the entire infrastructure hold up during that standpoint is something we have talked about, not just for Rutherford County, but just Middle Tennessee in general.
I agree there. Having spent several years in the wireless and therefore the backhaul that feeds that wireless industry, that's something that eventually those pipes come together, just as the pipes for your water system disperse out to smaller and smaller lines and then go back to bigger and bigger pipes. It's the same way with the fiber, and you're described a very valid concern there.
If I can, one about devices. So I wanted to give the committee an update on where we are with devices. So sitting at about 48,000 students. As a county in all of our schools, we have about 27,000 devices. So it's not fully one-to-one, but it does go along with our 2-to-1 initiative. If we connect that back to where we were last year, we were fully capable and replaced all of the devices that were either lost, damaged, or not returned. I mean, it was actually less than we have on a normal year of devices getting broken compared to the ones we did not get back. We have an extra 6,000 that were ordered out of CARES Act. Because of the delays, you can look on the news and see the other large district to our north is in a huge delay of about 70,000 laptops, and they need those yesterday. We aren't in that boat, but we are waiting on our 6,000 that are not supposed to be here till December 29th was our latest shipment date. So that's how backed up some of the deliveries are. But we are not anticipating needing those 6,000 for any of our students at this point. We feel like we have an adequate supply for any student that needs one.
Any other questions for Dr. Sullivan? Mayor?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Doug, did you mention anything about the K-12 grants? Okay, so last week, the governor announced $115 million in new local government grants, primarily directed towards Dana and what she's going to be able to get and apply for the counties. That was late last week when he made that announcement, but also the K-12 grants. And it talks about in here it says the technology grants is between 25 and 150,000 to support distance learning efforts, will be awarded through a non-competitive grant program managed through the Department of Education.
I was just talking to our Title I director today about that exact grant, and they're applying for it, sir.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're on top of it. We need to get our share, fair share, right? Okay, thank you.
Dr. Sullivan, I did have a couple of other questions.
Yes,
one of the things that we've heard is that students are required to have 6.5 hours of instruction per day. How does that work for a distance learner?
Happy to talk about that. I'm in the unique situation that I have a second grader who is battling leukemia, and he is going to be distance learning. I know there's no way in the world we can expect a kindergartner, first, second grader, even an adult to sit in front of a computer for 6.5 hours a day. That's not good instruction. What it amounts to is we need to provide access to 6.5 hours of instructional material a day. So whether that is a teacher providing 30 minutes and the student needs to then go and work on something in a 15 or 20 minute segment, then they come back and do 30 minutes of math, that can be how they access that. And it doesn't, yes, we're doing it live, but we're also doing it recorded because we understand that some parents at the end of the day, they may have childcare needs, of course, for the kid during the day, and they want to help their child when they get home. And so it doesn't have to be that 8 to 3 as well for that distance learning.
But the teachers are going to be required to take attendance. So how's that part going to work?
Absolutely, yes. We have to take attendance daily with, otherwise the kid is counted absent. That's we had to turn in a continuous learning plan to the state last Friday. And one of those requirements was how are you taking attendance for in-person and then also for your distance learners.
I think there's also a lot of curiosity about how we're going to handle quarantines. When there is a positive in a classroom, how's that going to work?
When we have a positive in the classroom, so the first thing that will happen is we will then dedicate that person to a different location in the school building. That will be contact to our parents. We have our screening to where we have our temperature and then our self-screening tools that all of our employees first will have to take every day, but then we're also asking our parents to answer every single day before they send their kid to school. Then it goes back to we have an entire policy on contact tracing to where if you've been within 6 feet for more than 10 minutes, then those people have to be quarantined. It is an entire 3-page document of checklists that our administrators have been made aware of, have been trained on, and will continuously be using. It'll be their lifeline, I'm sure.
So So again, how would that work? If I find out that a child in my child's classroom has tested positive, is my child coming home for 14 days? How's that going to work?
Not necessarily. It is all going to go back to that admin policy to determine how close were those students to each other. You know, if it's one student that tests positive and they tested positive on Monday, but the kids weren't in school on Friday, there's a 48-hour
Right.
layer, and that's happened several times, not just in our instruction department. But I envision that happening at schools. It depends on the time, it depends on when they became symptom-free or started exhibiting symptoms, and then it also depends on the proximity of the students to each other. For that aspect, mask or not a mask, unfortunately, it really doesn't matter. It's mask or not mask, the proximity.
So how's it, okay, so let's assume through contact tracing, everybody's been exposed, including the teacher.
Okay.
Now what's going to happen?
All of those students would then go home and be quarantined.
And the teacher?
The teacher as well. And then they would be set up through our distance learning platform, and they would, as long as everyone is still feeling well and in an ability to be able to participate, they would go through distance learning.
So is the teacher going to distance teach, or there'll be a different teacher?
If the teacher is still well, then they'll be distance teaching.
Okay.
If the teacher is ill, then we would go through our substitute teaching and then have one of their team leads or someone else be able just to ensure that kids could access the content.
Okay, so we've all been quarantined for 14 days. Now we came back and somebody else tested positive. Now what are we going to do?
We would go right back through it again.
So we're not doing the antibody testing or any of that we're not putting any false hopes in that?
Correct.
Okay.
No, we,
Okay.
as a school district, we have to be very careful with HIPAA requirements as
Right.
well, which is a fine line that we have to balance in making sure that our kids and faculty are safe, but also that we're ensuring privacy.
Okay, and then how does that impact the instructional days? Because those children are required to have so many instructional days, so how does that impact that?
It will not impact the instructional day. So in the past, if we had a gas leak at a school and we had to shut that school down, that counted against one of our instructional days for the entire county. As long as the students still have the access and the ability to participate in distance learning, that it still counts as a regular instructional day, whether they're in person traditionally or whether they are in that distance learning platform.
I have one more question.
Yes, sir.
You can comment or not comment on this, and I can understand if you can't, but I asked from Health Department today and received information as to how many children, the state is now releasing that information, how many children in the 5 to 18 year age range have tested positive in Rutherford County. That equates out to a roughly 1% of the school-age population. Are you aware of any of these being associated with any particular school or anything like that?
No, sir. Of course, not being in school, the parents haven't necessarily communicated that to us. I envision as we start school, parents communicating that to us. The state released today a suggestion for districts to actually receive text messages from parents. And we have that ability with School Messenger and Skyward to be able to have that ability. I'm sure with it being 1% in the size of our district, we have active cases of students in Rutherford County, but not being in school, we aren't aware of who those students actually are.
Yeah, I mean, the kids have been getting together. I mean, the athletic teams have been practicing, the non-school athletic teams have been playing. So the kids have been getting together in close proximity for the last several weeks. So you would expect, if there is a case, that gets transferred from child to child. I guess the next thing that I'll be asking our health department director is, if she's aware of later on when she's up, that is how many of those maybe had symptoms, because as we've seen in healthy adults, you can have 2,000 people test positive and only a handful of those actually ever would have, if they hadn't been tested, they would have never known they were sick or never known they'd been exposed. So that's just something I thought I would ask.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good, thank you. Are there any more questions before we dismiss them? Thank you.
Madam Chairman, just one follow-up if I could.
Yes, please, Commissioner.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Chairman Allen's question about what would we do if there is an outbreak and there's an increasing percentage of students at a particular school? Is there any plan in place to shut down a whole school? And then what would happen there?
Yeah, absolutely. We, as of right now, the school board still holds kind of that authority, if you will, for determining that plan. Last year, right during the same time, they made a motion to let Mr. Spurlock be able to make modifications as needed, just with letting the school board know. We have a metric that is published on our Rutherford County website that dictates the low, moderate, and high spread, and then we have a measure that takes into account 6 different things. So as a county right now, we're in that moderate to high spread. I haven't seen the updated numbers because there was a delay for the county earlier today. I believe we were at 0.83 or 8.4 yesterday, which would have put us in that moderate to high spread, which means that if we had positive cases in the school, we would need 1 to 2 metrics for us to consider closing. That doesn't mean we have to close. It means for us to consider closing a school building, and that's building specific. Those 6 metrics are talking about cases in the building, whether or not you have an active case, whether or not the number of cases are increasing, whether or not the teacher absenteeism is below normal, whether or not there's an impact on the support staff, and then the number of instructional days and how that has been impacted. And that is all school specific. If we are in a low spread, you, I believe, can hit 3 of those indicators before you consider closing. If we're in a moderate spread, it's 2. If we're in a high spread, then it is just 1 indicator to consider closing. But just 1 indicator doesn't mean we necessarily have to close. For example, if we have a training day as a district and our teacher absenteeism rate is below normal, that very well could be because 3rd grade teachers in the district at one school were attending a training at our central office. We try not to do that during the day, but sometimes we have to, and that would not be a reason to close the school. But we do have those metrics, and it is school by school, and Mr. Spurlock will make those calls. Absolutely.
Is there anything, Smith? Very good. Thank you all very much. I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Good luck, yes. All right, Health Department, Ms. Garrett. Hello.
Okay, tonight I bring the June report for clinical services and things that we're doing in both of our facilities. As you can imagine, we're still doing a modified plan. A lot of our visits are happening telehealth. Our WIC program, which is one of our largest programs, the Women, Infant, and Children program, is still being done telephonically. The federal government spread that till September. So we'll continue to do that over the phone with our patients. So we're keeping about the same numbers in that program. We're just doing all services over the phone. Of course, any kind of classroom things that we do or community educations have been cut back, and mostly we are, any extra staff that would have been doing those kind of duties are now doing contact tracing, calling of cases, helping us run our daily testing for COVID. Since we last talked, we kind of converted our testing at Murfreesboro from a drive up where you had an appointment and you drove up, we walked out and did your test, to a drive-through testing. So we now are able to do with our new method somewhere around 600 tests a day. In our county, there's about 1,000 tests that are occurring for COVID every day throughout the county. Usually on average, about 600 of those are through the local health department. There's no appointment needed. There's no restrictions. We test from 8:30 to noon. Since we are able to get people through, we did some time studies, and it's literally about a minute or two, less than 2 minutes for you to get all the way through, completely documented and tested and out of the drive-through. We still have our strong partners who are helping us at the local EMS service. They're sending some paramedics to help us test. We have the Murfreesboro Police are there every day helping us with traffic. making sure that's happening, keeping the flow going off of Maple Street. And we hardly have a line. We're so fast and efficient at it now that there is no long wait. We can quickly get you in and out of there for testing. Over the past 14 days, we've seen around an average of 1,000 tests per day done in the community. We're also seeing an average of 116 positives coming back. Compared to 2 weeks before that, we were 99 positives coming back daily. The state has put out a lot of county local data. So instead of just state data, if you're interested in seeing county data, it's all public. And you can go right to the State Department of Health website, click on county data, and see all different types of reports based on age and school age, and that they're trying to make the data very available for anybody who's interested in that. I think that's, I just kind of wanted to give a little summary of what we were, since we last met.
Very good. Any questions for Dana?
Yeah, I have one. Can you hear me?
Yes.
To recap on the test, that's only at Murfreesboro, and it's 8 a.m. to noon, Monday through Friday. Is that correct?
8:30, yes. 8:30 to noon, Monday through Friday.
Okay.
At the Murfreesboro site, yes. We just, instead of in front of the building
Thank
where
you.
we were, we're around back.
Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Dana, have you been having, excuse me, have you been having conversations with Rutherford County Schools and helping advise and guide them?
Yes, so Mr. Spurlock and I meet and talk pretty regularly, as well as the city schools. So I've been trying to give them guidance. The Tennessee Department of Health and the Tennessee Department of Education have been working super close on trying to come up with guidelines and data points, and I share those locally with our school board leaders.
Is there any specific misinformation that it's a question you continue to get that you have to correct? I know, for example, there was one question that I had called you about where I was told that if somebody tests positive and they come back for a retest and that test is positive, that one person is counted as 2 cases, and you had told me that that's not correct.
Absolutely not true. Okay. So if someone is a repeat test person, we would only count that first test result. So we only count that one positive. We do count the number of tests that are done. So when I say there's 1,000 tests, we are counting that person every time they get tested, but we're not counting them in the positive number every time. It's really not recommended that lots of employers are telling their people they have to test negative to come back to work, or they have to have negative tests weekly, or just lots of employers are making up kind of some rules that aren't necessarily tied to science. And really, if they've completed their quarantine, they can return to work with a letter from the Department of Health telling them they're out of quarantine, they can return to work. It is not recommended that they be tested out of quarantine, because there is some studies that show there can still be a little bit of the virus that would show on a test but not be spread to others. So it's best that they do their quarantine and then return to work, not trying to test out. I think that's another, and the CDC has made that very clear that that's not a recommendation, as well as the State Department of Health. I think that's one. I think also when people are placed into quarantine, they often think, okay, I'll run out and get tested and then it'll be negative and I can get out of quarantine. But you can't. It doesn't matter if you have a negative test. You still have to spend your time in quarantine, because we know that it takes 2 to 14 days once you're exposed to start to show symptoms or to start to have the disease. So even if at day 6 you run and get a test and you get your results, you think, oh, I can go back to work. Unfortunately not. You have to stay the whole time out. So yeah, it is going to be challenging for sure with back to school and working with the classrooms. The school programs, the nurses at both city and county have been amazing, and getting trained and working with us and talk to us pretty much multiple times a day. So we're giving them guidance and helping them figure out what to do.
Did you have something, Mayor?
I did. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Dana, going back to talking that I mentioned a minute ago on the announcement by the governor last week of the $115 million, we should get a fairly good chunk of that amount of money, being the fourth largest county out of $115 million. But unlike the 210 that we got previously that was unrestricted that we're still going to be spending, it says that it has to be targeted for medical expenses, public health expenses, payroll expenses related to COVID-19, public health compliance expenses, and other reasonably necessary expenses incurred in response to COVID-19. Can you help us figure out where we need to be spending that? I mean,
Yes.
it's amazing that all of a sudden we're just flush with money coming from every different direction.
Right.
You know, and we want
Trying
to
to
be,
figure out how to get
we want to be mindful that we
big
spend
bang
it
for-
correctly.
Right,
I was wondering if your new phone system that we were going to pay out of that other grant for $300,000 could be put into this for COVID related, because you said that new phone system is one, because it's so expensive, it's recording every message that comes in, because that's one of the problems of the messages that come in. It's not being recorded, and people are not telling you the truth of how they're getting out of going to work.
Right.
Correct?
Right,
With-
yeah. There's that and just overwhelming phone, we call it phone meltdown at the health department. There's just 200 calls can come in a 15-minute span of time. And it just kind of melts our old system, because according to Black Box, it's a end-of-life service of that machine. And it's been there for a few years. We've kind of been limping along with it.
I'd like
So
to
I
check
think that
into
would help.
Yeah,
with-
I'd like to check into that to see if it could come under this and we can use that other money for something else.
Yes, exactly.
You know.
'Cause- yeah, and there's been a lot of new studies. Medscape just published one about the effectiveness of the UV lights as well, and I think that's something we could utilize in our public health departments, our jail, our
Yeah,
courthouse.
we finally got those in that we ordered in March, and they just came in last week for the ambulance service. We got 20 of them in. It took that
Oh,
long
that's
because they were
great.
being made in the.
I think the state had ordered some, and they're not quite in, I mean, they're still on back order.
They're
So.
manufactured in the UK, and for whatever reason, because of COVID, we couldn't get them, but we found I saw them over at the ambulance facility last week, so they can put it in a room. We took them over to the judicial building and deconned. I think it made the employees feel better. We've done it here in finance office. We've done it in Teb's office. Probably need to do his again. And we've done our office. But the phone system, I think, is important as well. If we can track that and put it in and turn it in under this grant,
Absolutely.
would be
I think
good.
that would be an excellent use of it, and something that we desperately can show that we need to handle the calls that.
Anything else you can think of?
Yeah, the UV lights, and then they have the HVAC systems where you can put the UV lights into that as well. So I think some of that stuff in the prevention of not necessarily COVID, but whatever, any of our buildings where we have large amounts of public that come in and out of them.
Sure.
Pardon me?
I said sure.
Yeah. So those are some off the top of my head, but definitely we can look at it and see. And the state, I'm not sure how they're going to send that out or disperse that out to.
Yeah, Rachel
our
can,
request.
she can testify the 200 phone calls every 15 minutes when I mandated the mask.
She'll call me and say, y'all must be in meltdown because we're getting the overflow. So we're trying as best we can. We just ask people to be patient with us. But since now you don't have to have the appointment like before, we've tried to remove as many barriers from people so they can come quickly and easily and get tested. And I'm quite proud of how efficient it has become. And
Yeah, you guys are really doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank
You
you.
rock.
Dana, what's the turnaround time right now for a test?
so right now, recently the state switched labs because we were having a really slow turnaround. And so we've gone to another lab, and the 2 to 3 days is what we're seeing right now.
Excellent.
So fingers crossed that we can keep that up with the current lab that we're using. Because that's what we really need, is some fast turnaround. Then we can make better judgments on things when we have a quicker turnaround.
Is there
I have
anything?
a question.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Yes, question and comment, follow up on that. The Commissioner of Health quoted this afternoon 2.8 days as far as getting the test results, but there's transportation and other time involved in getting the test, and so there's still some of that, maybe 4 or 5 days, and actually getting the results back. But my question is, do we have any way of knowing, other than hospitalizations, which hospitalizations track those people who have been affected in the extreme by this virus, but do we have any other way, or do we have any knowledge of the several thousand people that have tested positive? That is, they had this virus in their nasal cavity. How many people actually have gotten sick?
So first part of the question with what the commissioner said, she's talking statewide. So the numbers I was saying about turnaround right now, that's legitimately for Rutherford County residents tested at the health department. We are seeing a faster turnaround at this point, so that's helpful. We have a courier that picks up our specimens twice a day to drive them to the lab, so that there's no delay in the specimen even sitting there for very long before it's en route straight to the lab. And the second part, you wanted to know about how would we tell symptomatic, or how many people had actually been sick. I don't believe that's a public data point that is collected and shared at this point. It is one of the things I can send up to our State Department of Health and say it's something that you'd be interested in seeing, and see if that's something that they're collecting and how they could share it.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dana, is there anything that you need from this commission or this committee, anything that we can do to support you in any way?
No, I think you guys have been supportive, understanding. I've had to do some remote meetings and that just because I'm running from meeting to meeting, advising and helping people figure out what to do. So I appreciate that support, and so I can't think of anything specific.
Good. Good. If there's no more questions for Dana, I'll entertain a motion to accept her report.
Move to approve.
Second.
Very good. Will you call the roll for us?
Commissioner Blair?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook? Yes. Commissioner Ely? Yes. Commissioner Gammon?
Yes.
Commissioner Gurley?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Chairman Allen?
Yes. Thank you so much, Dana. We appreciate you.
And I have a budget piece that I brought. This is the state contract, the pass-through dollars. Ms. Nolan's looked at it, and it matches up with what we had in our budget that you guys have already approved, and then went to budget and was approved by the full commission. They did add, and that's in the budget that we had, but they did add a state position that was a state position. They transferred it back onto this contract. So she asked that I put that in the minutes on the contract, but that's the only thing that's different. And again, these are state pass-through dollars. We don't pay anything locally for this contract.
I'll entertain a
Madam
motion.
Chairman, I'll move to accept the contract.
Thank you. Ms. Carroll seconded.
Commissioner
I'll second
Ely?
that.
Yes. Commissioner Gammon?
Yes.
Commissioner Gurley?
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips?
Yes.
Commissioner Cook? Yes. Commissioner Blair?
Yes.
Chairman Allen?
Yes. Thank you.
Guys,
Thank you so
appreciate your
much. We
support and
appreciate
help.
you.
Thank you.
All right, we got next is community care report. That report is on your iPads. Carol or Mayor, either of you have anything you want to share?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Basically, we're still in lockdown. With all the other nursing homes, we're just trying to be as careful as possible. They're allowing, family members and visitors to come and make contact through the window on the outside. but we're still locked down, hoping to keep it away. And so as long as we're in that position, we can't start the construction of the new wing that we were planning on remodeling starting back in January. So we're still on a as-is basis. We'll just continue operating, you know.
Holding pattern.
Yeah, we were fortunate. We were able to get through Smart Bank. They helped us fill out the grant. We got, I think in that PPP, we got about 1.2 million that helped offset some of our losses, because as in nursing homes, as some of your population, they pass, but then you can't bring in new, you know, so especially if they're in quarantine or anything. So it's been difficult as our population census continues to decline, so does that revenue. So that 1.2 million really helped us, didn't it, Carol?
Is the contractor still holding to our bid, or quote?
Well, yeah, he just wants to get started. However, I have talked to some contractors just in the last couple of weeks, and prices of building materials are beginning to climb. So I think we'll have to, you know, lumber's gone up, other products have gone up, so may his project go up as well. As you know, I don't think his labor is going to increase, but you know, I feel sorry for them. I'm sure they've probably got other jobs, so they may have another job when we finally lift the curtain and they can come back in. We may have to wait for a longer period of time because they've got to try to feed their people, you know, which is clearly understandable. It's just one of those tough positions we're in.
We're good. All right, I'll entertain a motion to accept the community care report.
So move.
Second.
Call the roll.
Commissioner Gammon,
Yes.
Commissioner Gurley,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Blair,
Yes.
Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Ely, Chairman Allen.
Yes. Very good. All right, the last item on here is our special projects report. Ms. Jolly, if you want to come up. This is our tracker where we keep track of all the expense on each of the capital projects that we're working on. And is there anything in particular you want to point out for us? Any major changes?
Major changes, as you see, it's June 30th. We've not done anything in July yet. We're paying through June 30th through last week. I've increased the budget on the Laverne Middle Annex to $16,523,640. And then if you look over at what I used to call the multi-school campus, I've actually broke it out into Tan Oaks Elementary, Tan Oaks Middle, and Tan Oaks High School, based on the $52 million that you approved at the County Commission.
Are there any of these projects, the older ones, that were about ready to drop off? No, you don't know. I just know we've still got Rocky Fork Middle and Rocky Fork Elementary on here. So. Rock Springs Elementary, yeah.
I don't know, I'm not sure.
To me, it looks like it's close to it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big addition.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions for Ms. Jolly? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Commissioner Gurley,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Blair,
Yes.
Commissioner Cook, Commissioner Ely, Commissioner Gammon, Commissioner Gammon,
Yes. Yes.
Allen.
Yes, very good. Thank you, Ms. Jolly. Is there any other business to come before this committee? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.